the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Hey everyone, this is a really fun, uncut, out there, full-on podcast with the wonderful, the beautiful Angelica Neri. She is an Ayurvedic practitioner and an amazing spiritual business owner. She specializes in yoga and Reiki and just being a little badass. We had such a fun conversation. She had invited me onto her podcast a few times, and I decided it's time for you and I to have a talk on mine. Let's talk about something spicy. How about relationships, romantic ones specifically? And I hope that many of you out there listening will resonate with being imperfect at human relationships. I don't know if it's just me, but we go deep into it. We go into some of the practicality, and we also go into some of the deep spirituality of like why we're even doing this thing called relating. I hope that you love it, that you enjoy it, and I hope that you are thinking about joining us in January. This coming 15th of January, we start our world-renowned, world-beloved feminine form Ayurveda School class of 2025 starts this January. And we've got a seat there in Zoom, in the Zoom room with your name on it. You can come live or you can watch it anytime at your home, at your convenience, integrating it into your daily life. 2025 promises to be a very fun, interesting year. And you know what? I want to have a spiritual home base. If you feel like you might need one too, we've got a place for you. We are just amazed at how much women love our school, and I hope that you'll think about joining us if you want a taste of it, totally for free. I've got, I think, almost 3 hours worth of class with me that gives you an idea on it. So that's going to be in the show notes, as well as where you can go to sign up. We've got tons of different payment plans. Head to our show notes for more info. Hope to see you in January and enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is extra special because we're sharing it on both Katie's Spirit Sessions and my podcast, the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. And we want to talk all about conscious romantic relationships today and dating in the modern world, which can feel like a whole other world to be in. But we got this inspiration from this podcast because Katie was on my podcast most recently, and we just lightly touched on this topic. And it kind of was like that, like crack open of like, whoa, there's lots here that we can talk about. And I know I just have a lot of friends who are in their 30s and their 40s who are dating. And I'm even seeing like other generations as well who are dating in this world and wanting romantic relationships, but feeling like a lot has changed based on like what's been going on in the past. So we took some of your questions from our Instagram channel that we're going to be answering in here today. And yeah, we're just ready to dive in. I'm excited to be here with you, Katie.
Yeah, it's always really great to be with you too. And you know what I noticed in you, which I felt was like really cool and really brave, is this way that even the topic itself has become almost a taboo.
Mm.
And so in Tantra, any place that is taboo inside of us is where the maximum interest and power is. And so like to just kind of name that which shall not be ever named is just to kind of frame the conversation where we exist in a soup where people feel like there's a right way of speaking, there's a right opinion to have, there's a right way of being. And I think opening up this conversation in and of itself is a radical act. So good job. And I am super excited and also terrified. And I actually, Angelica, like don't talk a lot about this. We do have like a whole module on conscious sex and relationships in our school, but it's not something that I've been publicly super open about. And what most people don't know is I'm deeply interested in it. Like if you saw the books that I own, it's all about love and dating and relationships and understanding family dynamics. And it really is like such a place of my heart. And it's also been a place of so much pain. And so when you say people in their 30s and 40s, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm one of those people. And maybe you can speak to this too, Angelica, but what I've seen is that there are so many of my friends are either single or in relationships. And that's almost even worse. There's this feeling of like, oh my God, these women are doing so much work on themselves and they're investigating the depths of their karma and they're doing these spiritual practices and they're in some ways not feeling met or fulfilled by their partners.
Totally.
And like, is that just a thing? Or,
right.
And like, maybe we can look at our history as women.
Totally. I think that's such a great point because so for example, like I've been single and I'm a very independent person, have been like my whole entire life. And actually I'm kind of the opposite as you, as I've been not interested in relationships. I like to put on this hard shell of being like, it's so vulnerable to admit that you want to be in a relationship with someone. So that's been my whole thing that I've gotten over, or at least I'm working with these past couple of years of like, oh yeah, I do want that relationship. I see the value in it. I see how you evolve in relationship. But going back to like, it's so funny. I have half of my friends who are married and children, and they are questioning marriage and they're questioning their partnership. And then I have half of my friends who are single and questioning why they're single and what's going on. And are there men out there who are going to meet me with where I'm at right now? And yeah, I guess my first question is, what is a conscious partnership in general? Like, let's try to define that first, because I think we have evolved so much, especially these past couple of years. And I think we're just redefining a lot of our systems, and relationships is a huge one in that. So how would you define that?
So we do this mudra in Shakti school of like this gesture where you're holding up two things at the same time. It's like very Jungian. It's very two oppositional forces that seem paradoxical are both existing and true at the same time. Jung called it the tension of the opposites. And our job is to be able to hold the tension of the opposites. And so your question, what is a conscious relationship? On this hand, I would say a conscious relationship is one whereby we are attempting to bring consciousness to what's happening, to bring awareness to what's here in ourselves. And that's this other hand. So that's what it is. Hey, babe, when you said that, I felt a little bit anxious. Like, I'm just going to sit with that inside myself. Or, hey, I noticed that X. I noticed that. I see that. It's all words for conscious. I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this in you. I'm seeing this in me. Yeah. So that's all good. That's relational. And then over here, you have this other tantric truth, which is conscious relationships don't exist. Like, by very definition, relationships are the way in which we go unconscious. even if we are literally like, hi, I'm Johnny McAppleseed and I'm a conscious healing teacher and I'm the conscious relationships guy. I've hung out with those men. Dude, Angelica, you know what I'm saying? And listen, if somebody is a conscious relationship coach, go date them for a while. You'll understand what I'm trying to say. There's no getting out of the way in which human plus human equals ouch, ouch, ouch. Dr. Ladd, my Ayurveda teacher, says it like this. There are two paths to God, one of the lover and one of the yogi, the peacemaker. And the lover, the path of the lover is the path of suffering. But it feels so good to love. It's so worth it. And that's the path of being a human. And so he was not dissuading us from love, but saying, make sure that you bring peace to being a lover. So by definition, this experience of the other is often the mirror through which we project all of our unconscious karma, trauma, rama, right? Maybe you can add to that.
It reminds me of that Ram Dass quote of like, if you think you're spiritual, spend a week with your family, like using family synonymous with partnership, relationship. These people that know you the most, they're going to see your unconsciousness because they're with you the most. And so if you think you know everything, like you really don't. And it's going to come up in relationship, and you have to be open to seeing those painful parts of you that are just simply being reflected. I guess my question is, do you feel like there, and I don't want to make this gender-based. Again, this is like holding both ends, and we're going into uncharted territory. But is there, I think a lot of women would agree, like they're getting into the spiritual stuff. They're the ones who are being more conscious. They're the ones who are committing to these practices and rituals. And then you get men who are, been in this patriarchal system and not doing this self-reflective work and causing more harm and seemingly liking to have more power over women, as we're seeing by certain leaders who are a representation of the whole that we are. Is this a collective pattern that's going on where women are more conscious than men?
Well, first I want to say, how brave of you to frame the question. Because within your question, even though you gave this beautiful caveat of there's differences and similarities and spectrums, but the whole of Tantra and Ayurveda is based on duality, this idea that there is the yin and the yang, right? There is biological differences between men and women that affect what we call their rasa, the juice of their body, that a Western doctor would call their hormones. And so there's this awesome This American Life where this gay woman decides to transition. And so she starts pumping herself full of testosterone. And this cool Seattle lesbian suddenly takes all this testosterone, and she's on the subway and she's like a beat poet, like uber feminist, right? She's on the subway and she's like, oh my God, I am a freaking testosterone-filled asshole man. All I'm doing is ogling women and objectifying them and seeing their legs. I want to like catcall. Like there is a certain way in which the sap of the body, the juices that flow through us, the way that our brain neurons are connected or not connected, completely alters our experience of reality. And that's why we pray to Ganesha. At the beginning of all tantric ritual, you go, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. I bow before the fact that I am in a meat suit. And what I ate last week, and the fact that I'm a woman, and what my ancestors ate, like all of this infinite amount of matter is affecting my perception of reality. So yes, there are differences. And then within those categories, there are vast differences therein. So it's super complicated. But I think what Ayurveda does, and what many of these ancient systems of all of our ancestors have done, have attempted, like we do in science with biology or chemistry or astronomy, to understand the complexity. We must make these categories and generalizations. And in Ayurveda, listen to this, it's going to blow your mind, Angelica. The man was in charge of the spirituality of the household. The woman was in charge of the love. And one of my first Tantra teachers in India said, now what has happened in the West, and India is coming along later, is that the roles have been reversed. It's the woman that is the spiritual head of the communities. And not to say there weren't women super in charge of spiritual communities, but that we've reversed it, but because we needed to. We had to, as women, take on the role because it was being left behind in our materialistic culture. I think what you and I are feeling is like, this awesome, way in which we are activating what Tantra says we should do, which is we activate the 3 parts feminine, the 2 parts masculine. Like we all as women need to own and feel and experience a matured inner masculine and a matured inner feminine, as do men. But as we're doing it, I think there is a sense in both men and women of a grief that the primary wound of our culture, and not just American, because I've traveled all over the world, it's everywhere. The primary wound of the culture is the schism and the loss of divine connection between women and men. And from there, you get everything we see in pop culture, politics, government, money systems. It's all coming from this primordial wounding that men and women have. We've entered into battle with one another, competition. And so your girlfriends and my girlfriends, and we can feel like canary in the coal mine. There's this primal wound that I'm grappling with inside myself. And yet we want to enact it out.
It's really interesting because we have to speak in generalizations to like understand these things. But I do see, it's so interesting. Like as much as there's certain parts of wounded masculine qualities that I detest and I'm like, ick about, there are certain qualities about it that I'm seeking. Like, okay, the whole like cat and mouse, like chase and kind of be hunted, like those primal needs. And I think it's really interesting and kind of just like bring it into modern times of like the dating apps kind of takes away from that hunt and be hunted, from that chase, because you've already agreed upon that, there's a certain amount of connection that you like each other and you're going on a date. And where is that kind of like stealth? Where is that kind of like,
come get me?
Yeah, like I miss that. So like, do you think that is completely torn away from like the dating app culture or just like in general?
The dating apps are Dante's 7th level of hell. And I've been on them.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're also like, again, there's the mudra. They're also like amazing to be able to access instant connection to all these people that you probably would never meet or come across. So most people, I think in the future will be meeting in some form of digital manner. So I think humans be humaning, right? And so you can create loving relationship out of a dating app. Absolutely. But, there's this old book called The Medium is the Message. I actually don't think that's a title, but this is like one of the famous lines from it. Like the medium is the message, meaning the means through which something comes about is the quality of value that we give it in some ways. And so when we're on these dating apps, like the question might be like, are we diminishing that sacred quality and unconsciously creating this diminished value of the other? You're speaking to something a little bit, so I can kind of go through, and I won't do it, but we could, right, to keep our minds really open and vast, the chakras, right? So you're speaking to a first chakra phenomenon. In the first chakra, we're animals, we're tribal, and the feminine wants to be hunted by the masculine in most cases in the animal world, right? That's like a hallmark. There are many animals that are male that do, put on a lot of peacock feathers. So it's not that they don't attract us as well, but if we take that and like, that's valid, right? But, Angelica, I've been hunted by many a man, you as well, I'm sure. You're just a radiant person. And how long does that last? It has a shelf life. And it's not to say there's not a time and a place for it, especially when we're younger. the shelf life is that if you tap into the energy of the hunting and the hunted, you can feel there's a tension there.
Mm.
And we enjoy that dangerous feeling. Why? That's first chakra. Hunt me. Are you dangerous? Is this dangerous? Because in our animal brain, it is. And for women, it especially is, because we could get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the definition of yoga? We're making that which is unconscious conscious. So now we're aware, okay, there's a part of me that's an animal that wants to be ravaged. I want to get the bad boy to come after me. I want to feel the danger. I want to feel the tension. If he's treating me great in the beginning, it's an ick, because that activation isn't happening, right? And we can open to that. We can honor that as a part of our reptilian tension. But we're on the planet to wake up more than the first. And so as you go up, the second is your emotional experience with this person, your intellectual, mental experience. The fourth is your real love for this person that is absolutely unrelated to what they look like.
Mm.
And then we could go beyond that. But spiritually, on the level of the feminine, the divine feminine that your podcast is all about, what is the divine feminine? Remember, the crown is the inverse of the root. They're actually one and the same. So the divine feminine is the infinite containership of magnetizing energy that draws all things to her in the universe. So the feminine's the chalice, the cup. So that hunt me, we can transmute and play with it for as long as you want, like a toy.
Totally.
But at the end of the day, what we're really craving is to have the experience of the divine feminine magnetization.
Totally. And I think that's where a lot of this distinctions needs to be made, is that we still want certain elements, just not in the way that they've been done in the past, but we want them in a more evolved way. Like even I was thinking about root chakra, I was like, oh, basic needs, home, finances, environment. That is usually protection, safety, security. That is usually what the male provided. And when I look at my parents' and grandparents' generation, that's what the male did. That's what he does. And I go home and that's still the case always. But now that we're evolved, I see emotional needs not being met. No emotional intelligence, no wanting, like the need for conversation and curiosity and to be held in these things. That's not there. But when we see that here, at least in my little corner of the world in spirituality, I've seen it where men are too in their feminine, where they're too overexpressive. And then I'm becoming the therapist for this person's emotions. And it's the same time I'm celebrating it, like, yay, men, you're sharing your emotions. But at the same time, like, no, I don't want to be your mother.
Shut up. I know. Dude, I understand you so much. We complain that they're not feeling and not expressing their hearts. And then when they do, we're getting the ick. Like, that's our problem. Like Brene Brown talks about it. And like, there's so many levels to this, because then you have the whole like attachment theory. And are we looking, and this is Freud talked about this as the repetition compulsion. So when you're like crazy attracted to someone, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're in a repetition compulsion. The repetition compulsion is the unconscious desire to reenact the initial wounding that we had with our most wounding parent. And sometimes it's both at the same time. So we will be attracted to someone for maybe those reasons. And it's, one of my teachers calls it, you marry your unfinished business. And so on a tantric level, we can say, great, I've married my unfinished business. This is the cause for celebration. Now, of course, not if they're abusing you or, but your unfinished business is what you're here to do on the planet.
Right.
So there's that piece. But what you might be getting the ick about is when someone is looking to you to process those emotions that as a man, he needs to be working to process in himself, right? And so we want to be there for our partners, but Brene Brown has an amazing talk on this where she says, men are actually terrified to show us their hearts and to show us their emotions, because in the past, when they do, it has been women that have told them, don't you dare. You go out there and be the warrior and the construction worker and the tough man, and don't fall off your white horse.
Totally.
So as women, it's also our job to be like, wow, how much am I actually unconsciously wanting him to actually not step into his heart because I'm uncomfortable when he does? Remember in the beginning, this is the place of suffering.
When I think about a conscious relationship as well, it's like, right now I'm single and I'm knowing when I enter a relationship, I'll be in this honeymoon phase where it's just bliss. It's pleasure. It's great. You're getting to know this person. You see them, you put them on the pedestal, you do all those things. But recently I've been reflecting on, there's going to come a moment where the pain will come. It's inevitable. You're going to have to look at yourself. It's going to be confronting. It's going to be difficult. You may question the relationship. You may question if you want to move forward with it. And I've been really contemplating, like, what is love after, kind of digesting the certain traumas that I've had growing up and seeing in relationships. And it's not a static thing. It's dynamic and it has to evolve and it has to change constantly. And I think that's what's the hardest thing, is that we put so much value in our romantic relationships as almost like that's our God. It's so interesting that you were saying like that path of like to God could either be the love or that. I think we've constructed this system that like, oh, this person has to fulfill all of my needs for me. They have to be what I saw in my mother and my father. And then when they're not that person, because who can live up to those expectations? Then all of a sudden everything comes crashing down. And I think that's like a constant evolution that needs to happen of that death and rebirth, and being able to like give ourselves that love. I'm kind of forgetting where I was going with this, but
well, super well said, sister. I mean, that's it. The whole gig, even if you find this, so I'm going to give you a straight answer. What is a conscious relationship? Forget all the woo-woo stuff, all the tantra, all the spiritual stuff. Let's just go to the ground. You and I are in a relationship, just even a friendship. I'm over here. What happens in me is my job to feel and experience. And if I need, after I've digested that, to give you insight that will benefit our dynamic of togetherness, I'll do that. And it is your job to process your feelings and be conscious inside yourself. And at the end of that digestive process, if there's an insight, and sometimes there's not, and you need to share that with me, you will. And then we build that trust of, I trust that your shit is yours, mine is mine. And the bubbles are solid. We're not merged. Unless we're having sex. That's when the auric fields do and should merge. Otherwise, these bubbles, two auric fields, totally separated. And then through the two, we can hold hands and walk around. But what we do, because we're flawed, messed up humans, is we go like this. And that's where it gets tricky, because now I don't know what's mine and what's yours. How much of this is you are an asshole and how much of this that I'm an asshole? I don't know where I start and you end. And so true conscious relationship is where both partners have an experience of their own inner divinity, their own relationship to spirit, or at least their own capacity to self-regulate and evolve in real time. Good luck finding that.
Totally.
Because we weren't taught that.
No.
What we're doing is we're dealing with imperfect people.
And it's like, we were brought up with that, the relationship with the mother. Oh my God. I mean, the more as a woman, as I grow older, and I just constantly see the underappreciation and all the things with the mother that we have put on, of like the mother having to be everything. And lately I've been, tuning in more to the divine mother. And like, whenever I need comfort, whenever I need soothing, or I'll go to the ocean and I'll get that. And that infinite love that is what you need. You know, sometimes you go to your mother and you're like, you're wanting that specific type of support and she's not able to give it to you for one reason or another. And you're like, oh, you're bummed about it or you're let down from it. But you never are if you go to the divine mother for that. And it's okay. Then you don't have to like blame your mom for any of that. Like the same thing has to be done in relationships as well. Like you can't blame that person for everything. You have to take accountability for your own. But I know, again, like it's like the illusion of it. When you're in a relationship, you can't see it because you've created this like life that's together. And I think it's also just like getting away from your intuition, right? And like leading your own independent life. Like when I think about what I would want in my future relationship, like I just see like, of course we've built this life together, but like I love my independence. Like I love my alone time. That is so important to me to be able to process and constantly self-reflect. Like if I'm not doing that, like I'm just caught in this cycle and I'm going nowhere. And of course you're going to blame because you're not having any type of self-reflection there.
Well, and I also think your statement, very much true, is just, let's just highlight that for all of us and listeners. The fundamental pain, one of them, there's several, but the fundamental pain that we all share as humans is the realization that nobody's coming to save us. You can have wonderful relationships, love, friendship, but at the end of the day, that relationship you called the Divine Mother, that's what we're looking to cultivate, Divine Father, Divine Mother, because those are the ones that we can rely on. And I think just making that your kind of North Star, ironically, makes you a lot more attractive and a lot more fun to be around and a lot less triggered and reactive. But also to have a lot of compassion for ourselves when we mess this up, because we will, and we're not going to get it perfect. And I think that's really the journey that we're on. I would much rather be in relationship with someone authentic, who's kind of messy, than someone who's got all the spiritual bypassy language, who hasn't really tapped into who they truly are. And my teacher, because I'm dating someone, I've been with someone right now for 9 months, and he is a 21-year highest level Marine. Girl, if we started a TV show tomorrow, it would be super, we would call it the Woo Woo and the Marine. It's like, if there were just cameras where you could hear him being like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? You know, like polar opposite humans. And there's a lot of love, you know, or I wouldn't be in that. But I think often we choose not the person that is going to make it the experience easy, but the very person that's going to mirror back the way that we are small, that we are petty, that we are insecure, that we are not expressing who we really are. And I think the hard part, and you mentioned the intuition, is to know, is this relationship in the service of that evolution, or is this relationship weakening me and taking me down a toxic path that I don't want to go down? And I think that's the real fundamental question we have to ask when we get involved with someone.
Totally. I do kind of want to go into that. One of our questions that we got from the audience touched on this. And I think, yeah, I've known this pattern of narcissistic and empathetic relationships. I think it's getting like a lot of popularity, but I just personally have seen it in a lot of my close friendships and just people that I know. And I think it's really hard when you're in it to see the signs. And there's lots of versions of toxic relationships where I think the relationship does need to end. From your experience, what are some of those tall signs when you're in a relationship to know?
Katie, from your experience being more empathic, dating more narcissistic type, what is your experience? She's like a little psychic. So I'm like a weirdo, as you know. And I've also listened to a lot of talk from a neuroscientist that was like a major CIA, FBI kind of like psychologist, like high level neuroscientist type. And he was talking about psychopaths and sociopaths, which would be that narcissistic dark triad personality type. And that truly, this is for our listeners to be aware of. truly sociopathic, narcissistic people do exist. And you definitely know a psychopath. You do. But they are rare in the sense that while you might know one, it isn't everybody that you've dated. Now, from that place, we can talk about narcissistic patterns that come up when people are in their triggers, right? Whatever those are. All of us have those. So to kind of just frame it as like, because what I'm noticing, and I've talked about this, is like now everyone else is a narcissist except for you. You're the victim, the poor baby girl empath.
Little lamb, just here all innocent.
No manipulation tactics are used. It's just like, I think another interesting way of framing this is, let's look at the way that we, often as women, but not always, some men do this too, we are more comfortable with the label of victim and empath and codependent than we are the label of manipulator, sorceress, narcissist, right? But inside all of us, there are those threads.
Totally.
So to answer the question, what does it look like in the crazy psychopaths who are the full archetypal embodiment of it? Run from those people like the plague. They are destructive and rarely change. And then what is inside of us that's actually like that as well, so that we must project it out onto the other.
Right.
So I think that that's actually happening. People who are very comfortable identifying as victims haven't tapped into the way that they are actually narcissistic. And once you, like my teacher, dude, she made me feel the way that I was Donald Trump.
Damn.
That's Tantra.
Yeah.
And then when I did that, he left my consciousness. He doesn't touch me, doesn't trigger me. But when you see these telltale signs, run the other direction. So what are some of those? I mean, an inability to feel and experience empathy.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say. I was like, it's really just empathy. I have these people in my life where I'm like, I know you've done horrible, awful, abusive behavior, but somehow I can still find reasons to love you, because although I may not do those exact versions, I can relate. I can still empathize that I have some of that within me as well.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the mythological root of the word narcissist, the root was that he saw a reflection of himself in the water and fell in love with that and then was drowned by it. But on a brain level, the narcissist has not developed the capacity to feel a sense of self. They're actually, ironically, there is no ego structure and healthy ego. And because there's no sense of self. Can you imagine? No sense of soul, no sense of spirit, no sense of even ego. And that's terrifying. And so they must get the reflection that they exist through the admiration, the energy, the attention of others. And I mean, if you look at it like that, it's wow, this is like the scariest place to live. These people who are actually full narcissists, like they have no sense of self. So if they don't, they're not going to be empathetic to your sense of self. So they don't have one at all. But what's so sad about it is as soon as you are no longer feeding their supply, they could not forget you quicker. You are feeding a narcissistic supply. I mean, I almost don't even want to talk about it because we're kind of giving them energy.
Yeah, totally.
But to be aware, yeah, you don't want to do that.
How can we define the differences between, that classic archetype and then just having narcissistic tendencies?
Because you are able to see inside yourself and others a complete, robust dynamicism of personality. Like I'm listening to myself talk and I'm thinking about my partner and I'm like, dude, he's got some of this shit. And then I'm watching myself do that. And then I'm remembering, and this is going to bring tears to my eyes, like what a sacrificing father he is. And like, we don't talk about this a lot, but how many men in our country, literally guys, construction, coal miners, electricians, military guys, the most equanimous country in the world, the Nordic countries, they have the most equal rights for women. Those women, they are just giving them money to go into the quote male careers. They don't want to go. Of course not. Who wants to die in a coal mine? Who wants to work on a rig in the ocean? These jobs that these men are doing are self-sacrificial, right? So when we start to open our mind through our practice, we start to be able to see my partner is 360 degrees. And when he's a jerk, it sucks. And when he's an angel, it feels good. But I'm not, and my teacher speaks of this, the 2-year-old brain labels people, because we do it to mommy and daddy, all good or all bad. And that's when we get triggered and we go, oh, you're all bad now, right? And now I'm working with the bad mommy. And so to come into conscious relationship is to actually be like, okay, right now you are being what I perceive to be this, but I'm able to remember the full expression of your humanity, which includes empathy, love, playfulness, gentleness, silliness, fear, all these things. And in that, I think you're in a good relationship. If you're able to actually see the dynamicism of this person, because that's our mother, that's our father, that's our sister, that's our brother. How many of us are in relationship to our loved ones where we know my mom does this weird thing and my dad does this weird thing and I love them and they're fun. And so to be able to hold that, again, tension of the opposites is the hallmark of spiritual maturity.
It's so true. The labels of the good and the bad, like people are so much more dynamic. They have so many different facets, but it's just like easier for us to do that. And I think a lot of times in these relationships where, I think before a lot of men weren't hold to a certain accountabilities and they're looking for the woman to set those, to express that, to say that. That also helps them feel safe, as having that boundary. And I've learned from a lot of my friends who are in marriages of like all they had to do, and I would give them this advice, but I'd never been in a marriage, so I didn't know how this would play out. But I said, you hold a lot more power than you think. Like you just have to say what you need and you want. I know it's easier said than done, but as soon as I'm thinking about one of my friends, she did that in her relationship. She was like completely changed. It was...
And do it from a place where you're not reactive.
Speak more on that.
Yeah. So the advice is dead on. Sweetie, I would love for you once a day, tell me one thing that you appreciate about me. That would be really good. Versus what I've been guilty of doing many, many, many times, feeling unappreciated, not saying anything, passive aggressively annihilating him for no reason, a small little sin, like you didn't text me back and now I'm going to rage out. And now what does the man say? Guys, we've all been there. You're acting crazy. And now you get even more triggered because your inner witch is like, oh no, you did not just call me crazy. I have learned, and trust me, like when I tell you, I may be the founder of the Shakti school, but I am constantly humbled by how much I need these teachings to stay on course. Like I came from a very broken home, and my mom and dad came from broken homes, as did almost probably 99% of our listeners. We as spiritual women oftentimes are given the task of processing that which mom, dad, grandma, and granddad like didn't have the capacity to. And so to actually, my teacher says, just don't take the bait. Don't react, explode vertically, not horizontally with him. And when I do that, and then I come to him, you know, there's an amazing book, the new version of Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Genius. I mean, this man has got it going on. And to realize in this, and again, we're going to generalize Angelica, but guess what? This is the #1 most popular thing that I talk about in Shakti school. This is like what women want to hear. And we're not given this data, but we need it. Men's brains, men's nervous systems, we're not taught this in general, Some men have more capacity, but in general, men's nervous system have 7 minutes of what they perceive to be conflict before they go completely into a flooded nervous system state. They're completely immobile, incapacitated. And they'll crack a beer, they'll walk out on you, they'll rage. 7 minutes. Women's are like 2 hours.
Wow.
So we're not working with the same hardware, excuse me. So by me owning my own trigger, eating it inside myself, experiencing it, now I can go to my partner with what's actually happening. Hey, sweetie, I feel really sad. I've been working through some sadness. Why? What's going on? I want you to remind me, words of affirmation are my love language. It's not your job to parent me, but it would mean a lot to me if once a day you could just say something of appreciation to me. He can hear that. What he can't hear is, and I can't do it in front of you, right? I could fake it, but you know what I'm talking about, and our listeners do. Men are so freaking sensitive, and they're so in tune to us. He can hear any level of emotional charge and reactivity in my words. And it shuts men down unless they've trained to stand in the mother freaking shitstorm that is our Shakti emotional storm. And some men train for it. And good, but my teacher always says, thank God you're not dating some conscious ponytail yoga guy who's trained to be able to handle you. Thank God you're with someone that's just like, nope, can't do that, because then that placates an old story of I'm going to charge up and you're going to placate me. And now I'm the unbothered queen who's not actually doing the work of holding her own emotion. That's the tantric answer.
Totally. And I love that you brought it back to Ayurveda, because it's like the constant work that you do on yourself, it changes the relationship and dynamic. Even just think about mother to child, you know, when you change how you react to your kids, it changes their behavior completely. And children are so sensitive. Like, I think that's such a great example of it, whether you're not yelling right away or you're more standing confident and saying no and a boundary, like they react to it right away. Like the same thing is going to happen in relationships, is like taking care of your own needs. And I think just bringing it back to toxic relationships or relationships that do need to end and die, if that person is not willing to grow with you and you find yourself caught in the same cycle again and again, and you're taking care of your end of the street, there's your answer. It just becomes so obvious, because you're like, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. Like I did my thing. Like, you're crazy over there. Like just doing that.
Dude, yes, Angelica, so wise. And like, I'm learning from you and myself as we do this, because that will be obvious when you've done your work. It will be clear.
But it's not what you want to hear. You want to blame the other person in the moment if you haven't done the work yet, and you want to say it's their fault. This is the reason why. It's easier to do that.
And what can also be true in this conversation is that some people, we all have our shadow sides, right? And some people are unwilling to deal with their shadow. And that's the path of the lover, the suffering, because for some of us, we come to that wall where we say, this is where I part ways, you know, because you're not willing to look at this. And I just feel for myself, and I want to like invoke the love of my friend, my best friend who's married. And she says, as long, and I'm not going to name names, and I know she won't mind me saying this, but it hasn't been a rose garden, and both of them have their stuff, and they've held it down for one another through some really rough stuff and through some really rough times. And I just said to her, it's been so hard sometimes. Like, how do you know when you should stay and when you should go? And she said, as long as he continues to be willing to look at his stuff and evolve, I will stay by his side. And I just thought that is the definition of a good wife. Jordan Peterson has a wonderful definition of a wife that I often remind my boyfriend of, which is a wife is a beneficial adversary. And we could say the same for a husband, a partner. women, man, who cares? My lesbians do this too. Is this person my beneficial adversary? And my teacher says, good for you and good to you. Good for you doesn't always feel good.
Totally. Weaving into this other question I do want to touch on, it's quite specific, but I think it's important. This person asks how to navigate a relationship with a partner who suffers from addiction. And I want to start with saying that like it's so specific to each person's circumstances. I don't think we can like generalize in any relationship. Like there's so many other dynamics that happen, because I've seen couples overcome that. Like maybe they were married and then it got discovered during marriage of this addiction and they've worked through it together. And I think and this is from my own experience, but if the addiction happens while you're dating, from what I've known from addicts and needing to find their own path, it's super important for them to find autonomy again and independence so they get to know who they are alone before being in relationship with someone. And I find it's just easier to not have a relationship with them while they are finding their own identity again and not sourcing it from someone else. Because same thing as we were saying, like it's easy to outsource that love and support that you need and not give it back to yourself. And with a disease like addiction, like that is what their journey is. So it kind of really, I think, depends like where they are in their relationship. But I would love to hear, what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I think what you just said, I agree with completely. Like we in Shakti school, we say there's one answer to every question. In Ayurveda, it depends, and I think that holds true for this conversation too. And whoever asked the question about addiction, Angelica's answer is dead on. Like, where are you? If you see the red flags early on, you might make that choice to bail, because it's going to be less suffering. If it appears after a committed relationship, maybe you can survive together, maybe not. Like it's a definite big challenge. So there's this like really practical level. And I know, I've been with the same mentor for 7 years and she's very well versed in AA. And the first rule, is like, I mean, if you're married, it's different, but like, don't get in a relationship while you're trying to get clean. And I think that's really, really wise, especially don't get in a relationship with someone else trying to get clean. There's that need to become established in the self again and established to your connection with God. So I just 100% agree with all of that. And now, me, I'm going to go over to this other nuanced place. And the nuanced place over here is all of us are in recovery. All of us are in recovery. So what is our addiction? We all have a little place we go when we feel alone or we feel like we can't cope, and just to have a lot of compassion around the whole scenario. Is their addiction affecting your life and your relationship and you in a deleterious way? Yes. Okay. There you have it. It's like that central Ayurvedic question. Is this overall strengthening me or weakening me? Overall, conflict can lead to strength. Too much conflict leads to death and destruction. It's the same with the addiction, I think, And again, I think it goes back to how you started the whole thing of like, what is conscious relationship? Like, is this person conscious and taking full ownership and in the endeavor,
I think conscious partnership too. Like, I love hearing about your relationship because that's like been my experience as well of people who don't seem spiritual or like they would be in conscious partnership actually are. And they do it in ways that you wouldn't actually see because we've now entered this whole world and we put labels on things and whatever. We've got all these modalities and practices, but they're doing it in their own way. And I'm constantly like blown away. I come from like a very big Italian family. So everyone's just like real, down to earth, like salt of the earth people. And I've had such great spiritual conversations with certain family members that I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I've been studying Vedic philosophy for years. Like, where did you pull that from? So like, what does that look like? What practices can that look like, where it may not essentially be us doing shadow work on a Friday night together, but what does that look like in a conscious relationship?
Like, again, if there were cameras in my house, you guys would be so entertained. So I have to tell you two very, very quick stories about dating a non-spiritual person. He has two children, 15 and 17. And we went on a journey together to the Grand Canyon. We actually dropped into it in a helicopter. It was absolute blissful experience.
Wow.
And these kids, like, they're their dad's kids. They like football and they like to eat Skittles and they're on TikTok all day long and they're wonderful and I love them. But my guy isn't into any of the stuff I do as well, right? But we play well together. And we're driving there. And the driver is like super spiritual. And so he's this old man in Arizona and like half Native American. And he's telling me about the Shiva rock and the Vishnu rock inside the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, what? And so I'm telling him all about this dream I had the night before of Varahi, the boar goddess coming out of the Grand Canyon. We're in this like super mystical conversation. They're all back there on TikTok, right? And I don't think they're even listening. And I say, yeah, and Barahi, and this like she hacks apart your ego. And from the back comes the 17-year-old daughter, and she goes, yeah, we're hacking apart Katie's ego. And I went, holy mother, she is the goddess. She is right. If me and Angelica are hanging out, nothing's going to happen. We're on the same level we're doing something similar, right? It's these visitations from other realms that actually hack apart the ego, who even thinks that she's better than or worse than. Then get this, in my mind, I'm deconstructing the whole matrix that says better than, worse than, spiritually evolved or less than. That's the Tantra, right? Like it's all God. And so today, Angelica, I called my boyfriend. Sweetie, I'm going to do this podcast on divine feminine, masculine, and dating relationships. And he starts cracking up and he goes, tell him you're not allowed to give them advice. And I went, babe, give me some cheerleading here. And he goes, here's the only thing you need to do in this lifetime. Stop thinking thoughts. You overthink everything. I was like, what is the essence of the Yoga Sutras? Yoga Shita Vritti Nirodha. Stop birthing the thoughts, or at least just don't take them seriously. And I thought, this guy that I don't think has any practice has literally just Zen mastered my ass so hard right before I go on this podcast and told me, stop identifying with your thoughts. He's like, stop. So to end perhaps on my end, and Angelica, you just go on as much as you want. But I think one of the last things I want to make sure that I say is that this relationship is just a mirror of how much we long to experience the unconditional love that is available. No human relationship ever can or will be the deepest longing that we actually have. Everything else is just this false idol, false God, false mother, father that we're looking for. And I think we're all being called to the task of feeling the disappointment of our relationships not being what our little girl dream Barbie, Ariel, Disney World romance wants it to be. And the hallmark of the maturation is that we're learning how to mature the inner masculine, the inner father, the inner mother in ourselves. And that is a place from which we actually become like really good partners, really good lovers, really good friends. And that's what I'm really trying to do. And sometimes failing epically.
That was a mic drop moment. Yeah, I don't want to add anything to that because that was really like a channeled message that came all the way through so beautifully and just tied with a bow. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and insights. And yeah, it feels really good and cozy when we're in conversation because we are in some type of similar frequency. But I get a lot out of it. I do. I find more depth in that relation, and I always learn a million things. And I am really grateful for your vulnerability too and sharing about your relationship. It's so helpful for everyone to hear like the down to earthness of the reality of things, of relationships and what they are. And everyone is so unique and different. So everyone who's listening, I hope you're inspired. If you have like follow-up questions, you can put them now on Spotify, and you can comment on Apple, or you could just send us a DM and we can talk about it further. What would you like to share about Shakti School and things coming up?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just how much fun this has been with you too. Like just to be able to sit together in that double goddess power. It's really rare to come together harmoniously as the two. And I hope that we've done a good job. I think we have at like actually embodying what it looks like to be in conscious relationship just as girlfriends, and what a deep pleasure it is for me to learn from you and hear your downloads and your insights. I think you're quite a bit younger than me. And so it's really amazing to hear the younger generation having all of these insights as well. So thank you. I can only say that we do one thing over here. We're called the Shakti School. We have one program. It runs once a year. It's starting this January 15th. We already have so many women gathered, and oh my God, people just put out in level 2 a movie about what Shakti School is. We didn't ask them to do this. They put out a movie on Instagram. We're like sobbing. We're really like lifelong friendships. It's an Ayurveda certification, but really it's like a girl goddess gathering party, meditation party. So if you're interested, links in the show notes, all that jazz. And what about you, Angelica?
Yeah, I love that. I'm doing another Reiki certification program in January to become an energy healer. Reiki is an energy healing technique. And I love about spirituality and connecting to the psychic world. So if you're wanting to strengthen those gifts and tune more into your spirituality, it's a half a course and then online training. And we'll have the link in the show notes as well for that.
Wonderful. Such a pleasure. And best of luck to you. I'm sure so many hunky dudes are out there listening to this podcast now. This woman's a hottie and a half, and she's wise and she's deep. I'm sure all the guys are hearing this. So many men that listen to the divine healers and the spirit sets.
It's all men who listen to my podcast, actually. 90% men. I'm kidding.
You're joking. Oh my God. I love it.
Do you imagine? One day. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini, who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.